Good evening, members. We're on time, so we'll make a start. And we've had a very interesting briefing session, which I think was very detailed. So hopefully that will help us when we get to discuss the Treasury Management agenda item. So just to make a start, I'm John Perry and I'm Chairman of the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee. And I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the committee. Before we commence proceedings, may I take this opportunity to advise you that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated and members of the Democratic Services team who are sitting to my right will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Tonight's proceedings will be broadcast by the Council, but if anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know now? I ask this question not to stop you, but merely to ensure that members and any members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. So, okay. I'd like also to advise members that they should only address the meeting by way of their microphones and to remind them to turn their microphone off when they have finished speaking. Please excuse me speaking through a visor, but for safety reasons I wish to do it, and because as chairman I have to speak quite a lot. It's easier to speak through one of these than it is to have a face mask and keep putting it on and off, though I do have one with me as well. So just to warn you on that one. Okay. No, just sorry for the hesitation. I was just inquiring whether we hope to have our new interim head of internal audit present. He hasn't made it at the moment, but is he on the screen? No, don't think so. Is he on the screen? Oh yes, he's in one of these emojis. Welcome to our meeting. I hope you find it useful, and obviously this post of head of internal audit is so important for general operations, for our audit. So very welcome to you. Okay, so let's go on to the agenda proper. Apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillor de Wigeline-Shepherd. Are there any other apologies for absence?
Yes.
Councillor Sand.
I'm very pleased that most councillors are wearing masks, but I am still very surprised that some members aren't, and I did say that I would leave if all members weren't wearing masks, as my fellow independent did last week. I don't think we should even be having the discussion, really. I think people should be doing the right thing. So I will be leaving the meeting now. And I think we should set a good example.
Thank you, Councillor Sand.
Please don't shake your head, Alan. I'm trying to protect you.
Sorry? Okay. Are there any notifications of substitute members? I don't think so, because I don't think Nick de Wigeline has a substitute members. Okay. Right, let's move on. Urgent items. There are no urgent items on the agenda, so we don't have to worry about that. And are there any visiting members? Nobody, I don't think. Can't see anybody on the screens. Okay. Our agenda item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? I don't see anybody, so that's fine. Disclosures of lobbying. Has anybody been lobbied? No? Okay, good. Consider whether any item should be taken in private because of possible disclosure of exempt information. I move that items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed. Agreed, everybody? Good, okay. Agenda item 8, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of November. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th November 2021 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Excuse me, you remember the screen here. Agenda item 9, there are no questions from members of the public, I don't think, so we can move on that one. Questions from members? Are there any questions from members? No? Okay. Committees, I will go straight on to the agenda proper, which is the committee work programme. You all got a copy on the agenda. Can this be noted to move forward? Okay, I move that it's noted. Anybody's got any questions? Okay, fine. Agenda item 12, which is the external audit progress report and sector update. So I'll ask Eddie Dunnett to, I can see her, I think, on the screen, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. I'm hoping that you have in the room Trevor Greenley of Grant Thornton, who is in attendance to present his report. Obviously, I can't see, so if someone could confirm, that would be good.
Okay. Mr. Green, please.
Can you hear me now? Yes. I'm happy to wear my mask. I'm not sure what the expected protocol is here. Fine. Okay. Fine. So the progress report includes some information on current issues and publications. I guess the main thrust of the report is just a position statement on our work on the 2021 annual accounts. So you may recall that we took our audit findings report to the previous meeting of the committee. At that point, we explained what had been agreed, which was that although we'd made substantial work in most areas, there were changes required because of a historic issue which involved a prior period adjustment. So subsequent to that, the Council has prepared revised accounts including that adjustment. We received those on the 17th of December. There's also another a working paper which was held back because it made sense to do it after the revised accounts had been prepared. That was provided in December, and then a revised version was provided last Friday. So we are currently reviewing the revised accounts, the most recent version from last week and the earlier version, and we will engage with management if there are further issues in respect to those amendments. We've also, as a result of our review process for the accounts, identified a number of areas where we require additional information, and we've shared a list of those information requests with the Council, with management today. So we will engage with them over the next couple of weeks to progress that as quickly as we can. In the report, we say that we're hoping to sign off by the 31st of January. We will do what we can to achieve that deadline. I think it depends on progress with some of the outstanding queries as to whether that will be achieved, but it will certainly be our aim to do that if it's possible. Other than the accounts, the only other work that's currently in progress is our work on the housing benefit subsidy claim. That's going reasonably well. The Council has completed workbooks which involve a sample review of cases, and we're currently reviewing that work at the moment. So I don't think there's anything else I want to draw members' attention to in respect to the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. First of all, did I get that you would finish this by the 31st of January? Did I understand that correctly?
The report says that we hope to finish it by the 31st of January. I'm not sure if that can be achieved. It's certainly our aim to do that, but it depends upon progress with the outstanding issues over the next couple of weeks.
Okay. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm really disappointed that we haven't got this signed off, because I have to go to a council meeting and report, and I keep saying it's going to be done, and it's not. Now, I know we've had COVID, and I accept, you know, this is not an easy situation. I do understand that. But nevertheless, it's not satisfactory that we're in 2022 and we still haven't formally signed off our accounts. That is not good. And I've got to stand in the council and say that if this is not done by the 31st of January, it will not be very good, to be perfectly honest. So I just want to register my own personal disappointment and concern, actually, that, you know, this has taken so long. And I'm assuming that we haven't got any sort of something hidden here that is a real problem, that something's going to come out and bite us all at the last minute, because that would be even worse. And I would like some reassurances that this can be done by the 31st of January, and we'll have a reasonably clear bill of health, because I think this is very important for us, you know, not just for our officers and for members as well. So that is where I'm coming from on this. So I would like some reassurance that, you know, we'll get this sorted and done.
Well, I fully understand that that you want to progress as quickly as possible, and indeed, there's no reason on our side where we do not want to do exactly the same. I fully want to progress this as quickly as we possibly can. In terms of whether we will do it by the 31st of January, I can only repeat that it will be we will aim to do that, but it will depend on progress. As I say, the most recent version of accounts was received on Friday. We have to work through, we have to use that, and we have to work through responses to outstanding review queries. So we will do our best, but we can't give a commitment that it will be done by the 31st of January.
Well, I think you got the message that this is incredibly important for us. Does anybody else wish to comment? Yes, Councillor Cooling.
Thank you very much. Chairman, John, thoroughly go along with what you say. Absolutely agreed. Just a question. The outstanding reassurances or inquiries or whatever they are they being held up because Maidstone Borough officers are snowed under with other work, or is it your team which is snowed under? I mean, where is basically the logjam? Thank you.
Can I come in straight away? I have every confidence in our officers and our team. I really do. And I speak with our director on a very regular basis, and the whole team. So I'm sure it's not at our end. Sorry to come in, but I feel very confident about that. But if you want to come back.
I think our aim has always been to minimise the number of queries that we ask the Council. So we complete work and we review work on an ongoing basis. It's difficult to pin down the queries at a point in time and say those are all the queries until we've got through the review process covering all areas of work. It's not really possible to be that definite. So we have provided a list today. It's possible that we could have provided some individual queries earlier, but until we got to the point of reviewing all work, it's difficult to provide a definitive list. And I think we're very keen not to waste time, not to waste your time by asking queries where it turns out that an answer was already there, perhaps in another area of work. So I think we are always obviously aiming to minimize the calls on your time. In terms of the nature of the queries themselves, I don't think there's anything there that is particularly complex. It's just things that to comply with auditing standards, we need a particular level of evidence or an item of evidence, and we haven't got it to date, and so we're asking for it now. but there's nothing there which is a new fundamental or complex problem that we think is going to start a whole chain of events. I don't think there's anything of that kind in the outstanding information requests.
Are there any other points anybody else raised? Okay, well look, I say this rather regretfully, but we note the report tonight, but I hope you can give it a really top priority to get this cleared, because I think it's very important for our council that we have this. So we're all happy to note at this stage, not happy, but we note at this stage. We agreed that? Okay, right on. Okay, thank you. Right, agenda item 13, and I think this is probably one of the major items on the agenda, actually. So I will ask John Owen to introduce this, because it's an incredibly important subject, and we've got to make a decision tonight as well.
Thank you, Chairman. For those members that attended the training prior to this meeting, I hope you found it very useful. Once we got past the sound issues at the start, I think it came across really well, so hopefully it sort of gives you a bit of knowledge to sort of like be able to ask questions and things on the strategies. Just want to say the Prudential Code was adopted by Council in February last year, which states that the authority has to produce a treasury investment and capital strategy ahead of the new financial year. These strategies are based upon the proposed capital programme, which totals 233 million over the next 5 years. A copy of the capital programme can be found on page 110 of your agenda pack. The reason for the high level of capital programme is there's a numerous amount of projects that have been put forward, but there's also some quite large ones as well, including the 1,000 new affordable homes, private sector housing programme and the leisure provision. The programme is being discussed at P&O on Wednesday. So the figures quoted in the strategies may change, but we don't envisage them changing very much. The proposed strategy for next year is to utilise balances as far as possible and to increase short-term and long-term borrowing to assist with the capital programme. Key points of the strategy are potential borrowing will increase over the next 5 years to approximately 216 million with a CFR of 274 million. Next year's borrowing is looking to increase by 20 million and the operational and authorised limits are set at 57 million and 67 million respectively. The Council are also looking into forward borrowing options. This is due to low interest rates in the borrowing market. So it's probably a good time to lock in some of these rates when we can for funding that we may need in the future. Treasury investments are likely to fluctuate during next year between 10 and 55 million. Investments will be short term, however there is a provision in the strategy to invest 2 million for over a year if rates become favourable and the funding is available at the time. There's also a current list of counterparties that the Council can invest with, which is shown in Appendix E of your agenda pack. Service loans currently will show a balance of 1.2 million at the end of 22-23. This includes a provision that's been put forward for £1 million to Maidstone Property Holdings Limited for refurbishment to the properties they are currently renting from the Council. The strategies have been compiled in line with accordance with the 2017 code, which is similar to previous years. CITFA have published a 2021 version of the code. However, this doesn't come into play until 23-24. One other thing, I'd just like to, at the last meeting we had a question from Councillor Calling regarding the DMO account, about maybe using the DMO account in place of the large funds we have in money market funds. Just to explain, money market funds are like a bank account. So funds go in there and then we recall them back into our current account when we're actually needed. The DMO doesn't offer such an account as that. You have to place a fixed term deposit. So that means if we were going to use it in a similar way to the money market fund, we would have to do an overnight deposit, all the paperwork involved with that. The next day, if we didn't need the funding back, we would have to roll it over, which means contacting them, do all the paperwork again, and which takes sort of officers' time to sort out. So it's the rates as well for DMO around about zero as well, so it doesn't make any financial sense to use them. When money market funds are gradually increasing, they're actually now up to about 0.10%. And also the credit rating as well for money market funds, as Richard was saying in the training, is AAA rated. The DMO is currently AA minus. So we feel it's probably a bit more of an administrative burden for no extra financial gain to use those accounts instead of money market funds. But I'm happy to take questions from anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any questions from anybody on this? Councillor Cooley.
Mr. Me.
To be very open, I did exchange an email with Mark Green earlier on, and I'm very conscious of the fact that at this committee I tend to ask a lot of questions and test everyone's patience. So I don't want to elongate the meeting, and I'm extremely happy to take some things offline, but I have got a few questions now, if I may. And Mark, if I may, my request for a meeting, not just for me, not a privileged meeting, but an in-depth meeting at some point outside this committee, I leave on the table. But my first observation is I just don't know how we can expect the council members to absorb 90 pages. I just do not think it's on. And I would have thought the majority of the members, no disrespect to any of them, would not have the time, and some may not have the inclination to digest 90 pages. And this is a very important subject for our council. As we've heard, the CapEx aspirations are very substantial over the next 4 years. And therefore I do think, and I'm probably criticising, I don't know how many people, and I don't wish to offend, there needs to be a far more digestible 3 or 4 pages which outlines what the CapEx programme is, all of the elements within it, what that means for funding requirements and the options. And it is, in my view, not a 90-page document. A lot of it, I think, is unnecessary, can be referred to, I don't know, on the web if a member is really interested, but it is, I'm being blunt, I think it's indigestible. But to get to perhaps more important points, the financing costs as shown on page 115, page 115, there's a table. So my first question is, by the time it gets to 2026-27, as postulated, the financing costs are 4.67 million in that year. Where are they shown in the medium-term financial strategy? Where are they shown in the context of what the council's ongoing funding is? Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Does anybody wish to address that one?
Sure, yes. Thank you, Councillor Cooling, and thanks for the advance notice of the questions. Of course, I'd be very happy to have a briefing with you or any other members that would like more detail. On the things that you've raised, first of all, so far as the length of the report is concerned, a lot of this, as you'll probably have gathered from Richard Basson's presentation, arises from SIPFA requirements. After the Icelandic banking crash, a lot more requirements were put on councils about reporting of treasury management. So what we've got here is really responding to that. It's material that we have to put in front of members. I do take the point that we should look at how we can summarise that in an easily digestible form. Personally, I think the table that summarises it most neatly is on page 111, at the bottom of page 111. What that table shows is for the capital expenditure in each year as projected from 22-23 onwards, it shows how we plan to fund that, and we have some of our own resources, as indicated in Richard's presentation. But to deliver that ambitious capital programme, we are going to have to borrow. Now, the final thing you asked about was about the cost of that borrowing, and you flagged up on page 115 the financing costs. When we borrow, we are obliged by the rules to ensure that any borrowing is sustainable. So what we do and will be doing with the affordable housing programme, which is the biggest component, in putting forward a business case to members for housing, we will be showing how that borrowing can be supported through the income that we get from that housing. It's absolutely a key criterion for William Cornell and all those who are developing housing capital programmes, that they ensure that the income that we get from housing or anything else that we're investing in will cover that. So you're quite right, you're seeing a 4.67 million outlay, but we are as sure as we can be that that will be accompanied by revenue to cover that cost. So I hope I can reassure you that we are addressing that in our projections. Thank you.
Yes, go on.
Thank you very much, Mark. That's very helpful. But I think pages 110 or 111 are perhaps the most useful in this pack. But I would have thought the bottom part of 111 would explain exactly what you've just done at the moment, that the majority of the CapEx is for discrete projects, which in essence, maybe with a cash flow problem, would be self-financing, i.e. they would not be a call upon the operational net income of the council. So I think that's a very important thing to say. But there are quite a few millions in here that I can see that may or may not generate incremental income. And therefore, I would have thought there should be a table at the bottom, this is more work, a table at the bottom of the above. That line is going to be self-financing with a bit of cash flow issue, and that won't. And that will be a burden on the operational net income of the council, which would have to be financed by either more borrowing or cost cutting. So these 2 pages are good. I think they need more fleshing out. And if I'm being rude, I absolutely do apologise. But thank you for that. I've got another, if I may. When the medium-term financial strategy goes to council, will it ever, as a management team, or sorry, an overview team, take a view of what I call planner's droop? That is, every organisation has wonderful aspirations to invest huge amounts, but in reality it just has not got the capacity, no disrespect, the capacity, the management capacity, project management capacity to do it. So does the council, will full council be advised by the professionals, yourselves, what a reasonable assumption for planners' droop would be, so that we can actually look at what you really think might happen? Thank you.
We're not planning to show that as a separate figures, but the risk that you flag up about the deliverability of the capital programme is absolutely right. And when we come on to the budget risk report later, you'll see that we're giving that risk a higher rating now because of all the challenges in delivering capital schemes. So it is absolutely a risk that people are aware of, and we're looking at all the things that we can do to mitigate it.
We'll shut up. In this report, and by the way, I have read it, it's well put together, but it is indigestible. So I think a reorganisation of it would be appropriate. But interest rates, we've heard a lot in the presentation we had before this meeting, and this document, this committee report, talks about interest rates, inflation at 5%. I think I saw 6%, and then in that presentation we heard of 7%. It is incredibly uncertain. But in this period of uncertainty, when we're confronted by a potentially huge but worthwhile, hopefully, capital programme, does that not argue even more to actually get more certainty by locking in, and I'll be coming back to borrowing in advance of need? Is that not an argument to be more conservative with a huge capex programme in front by locking in the availability of finance now, rather than taking the risk in 6 months' time, 7 months' time, that interest rates will start ratcheting up by another % or two? Does that not argue for a more aggressive commitment to borrowing? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cooling. Again, I think you're absolutely right there. You'll remember, I hope, from the presentation we had before the meeting, that the difficulty with our main source of borrowing, Public Works Loan Board, is that it's only available at the point that it will be delivered. So if we decide we need to borrow 20 million, we can't say, oh, we'll have 20 million in a year's time. We have to take delivery of it now. And there is this stipulation about not borrowing in advance of need. Now, having said that, there are alternatives in the market, which I am actively exploring at the moment, for going to the likes of pension funds that have matching requirements from their point of view. I mean, they're interested in having an income stream that might not start until 2024 or 2025. Those types of entity would be interested in fixing the rate today, but without us drawing down the money until some future point. So that is under active consideration, and yes, that would be a way of locking in today's interest rates, because I mean, it's clear that interest rates are only going to go up from where they are now.
Thank you very much. A final question, because otherwise you will throw me out. Working capital, as the previous presentation called it, I'm guessing it probably averages, I don't know, let's say 25 million during the year, and the odd 0.1% interest on that, if I can do the arithmetic, is about 25,000. I think I'm right on that. And therefore, being blunt, is it worth the effort to put in a lot of Treasury Management Act officer time looking at, I think it was 12 investment targets, no, 9 different organisations. Is it really worth the time? Should it not be a far simpler mechanism to park working capital? That's what all it is, to park working capital until it's needed, rather than gyrate around multiple possible investment opportunities when the total you're going to make on a 25 million, I'm just trying to check I've done it correctly, is 25,000 in a year for 0.1%. Is there not too much effort chasing too little gain for parking working capital? Thank you.
I'll try and answer. I was looking to John Owen because he's the man who actually has to do the work. So he would be the best place to say whether it's too much like hard work, placing money with lots of different counterparties as opposed to just parking it with one. To tell the truth, I don't believe it is an awful lot of work. And the benefit of the approach that we're taking is that it does spread the risk if we were parking the money with just one counterparty, even something as apparently solid as the Debt Management Office, which is the British government. I don't think that's as safe as spreading the risk. It's not a huge amount of work to place the money with different counterparties. So I do think it's worth it. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, John.
Just agree with what you're saying, really. Yeah, just agree. It's all about spreading the risk and not having your eggs in one basket, basically. So, yeah.
May I say something, Chairman? I agree with what Councillor Cooling is saying about trying to keep things simple for all the councillors and this committee, and perhaps having a one-to-one meeting on certain topics to try and sort of thrash out some of the issues. What I'd like to say here is I've read this report, and it's the strategies. I've got nothing wrong against the strategies in here at all. It's just I don't think that they give a full picture, or they for the councillors and for this committee. The elephant trap is inflation, and I would like to see a contingency scenarios or a worst case scenario in addition to these strategies, worst case strategies with contingency proposals of what would happen if there was a worst case scenario. And I think at the moment we are living in a period where we are vulnerable as Maidstone to inflation, interest rates, and all the other problems that are going on in the world. On page 78, it says inflation is likely to drop sharply in the second half of 2022. But then on page 156, it says there's a risk that it will remain high. Now, if inflation does hit 6%, I think it's rather naive, not for you, but for what people generally assume in the papers and everything else, that it's going to fall off because the cost of living problems are going to result in wage inflation. You can't sort of stop people asking for more money if they're being taxed and the cost of living keeps going through the roof. Now, if there's wage inflation, that is going to seriously affect Maidstone's position because 50% of costs of Maidstone is pay. And if pay is 50% and there's wage inflation, it's going to cause a few problems. Because the council tax is the main income for Maidstone, but at the moment it's capped by the government, so you can't suddenly increase the council tax. So you could end up with a nasty situation where pay is out of control and the revenue is falling. And if it comes down to staffing, if staffing is reduced, I don't know what that does to the net liability of the pension scheme, because that relies largely on people contributing who are working at the moment. So given these problems, I would like to see, if I think the committee actually ought to see it too, some kind of assumptions, the assumptions that we have in these strategies at the moment, which are fine, nothing wrong with those, but then another list of assumptions if there's a worst case scenario, so that we can then work out what the contingencies might have to be if we're suddenly faced with these disastrous situations in the mid-year. Now, in this document, it does say that if things change, that you will revisit the assumptions, but I personally would like to see those worst-case scenarios done at the same time as these strategies are put forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Titchener. Borough councillors will be aware that when we do budget projections for the medium-term financial strategy, we do actually test different scenarios in the way that you suggest, because it's absolutely right that we should look at what would happen if inflation were higher, and actually it's very much a live debate at the moment amongst councillors as to how much we should be allowing for, given that although the core assumption is for 2% inflation, what if we have to pay more to staff in order to keep them and to retain new staff? So definitely that's being considered. Looking a bit further forward, yes, council tax is capped at 2% at the moment, but there's another 20 million or so of income that the council gets from external sources, and quite a lot of that we can set the prices, and although obviously we'd be reluctant to put up prices for service users, in the end, if inflation continues to be high, I mean, we would have no alternative but to do that, so that would mitigate the effect, although I do see that you'd be kind of just getting into an inflationary spiral if you went down that route. So hopefully I've reassured you that we do take into account a worst case as well as the figures that you've seen here.
Can I add something to that? I totally agree with what Mark has just said, but I would add that we have a very detailed look at the medium-term financial strategy of the budget for 22-23. The whole issue of inflation, you're absolutely right, but it's something we've recognised as well, and in the scenarios, we even put in extra scenario for the sort of increase in inflation that might come about. So we are aware of this, and I think we've got to be a bit careful we're not conflating one particular decision we got to make tonight with the budget strategy that we are applying, because that is clearly something we are looking at very closely. I'm not saying they're not interlinked, but in this case, we are required to approve the Treasury Management Strategy, the investment strategy, and the capital strategy. These are specific items. Now, I've read them as well, and they're not an easy read. I mean, I give you that. But they are important documents, and they're the documents that we have to take into account, and that's the way they've been drafted. But I understand your point about inflation, but it is being addressed. There's no doubt about that. I can tell you that now. Does anybody else have any questions they wish to ask? Yes, Councillor Zivin.
Yeah, I'd like to support Councillor Cooling and Councillor Titchener in their comments. But one of the things that strikes me, Mark, presumably you've got this on an enormous spreadsheet of some sort. And do you have variables that you can change which slow down changing all of the predictions and the figures on it?
Yes, the strategic revenue projections, I mean, they're quite complex, but it's built up from a whole lot of inputs representing the different things that we're spending money on, wages, energy, etc., and we can flex any of those in coming up with the projections. So those are the strategic revenue projections, and then those get translated into more detailed cash flow projections, which John looks after, where we're monitoring cash flow literally on a daily basis. Generally, we look at least a year out so far as the daily cash balances are concerned. So yeah, we do model in quite a lot of detail how we expect the council to perform.
Right, yeah, okay. I was just thinking to alleviate some of the anxieties that councillors have, if it would be possible to put that spreadsheet up, the 5-year plan with all of the breakdowns on it, and be able to, just by changing a variable on inflation or rates of exchange or whatever it happens to be, to show the effect on that plan in a meeting like this on screen. Would that be possible?
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but I think, again, I'll come back to what I just said. We're conflating two different issues here. We're talking about the budget, I think, and this is not really part of what we're trying to agree or discuss tonight. So if you understand me, it's there, and I think it can be done, but it's not really for tonight. Okay.
A final detail, and I think it is, well, it's certainly in this document, on page 51, I just want to check that we're bulletproof on the following, because it's stated here that acquisitions should be for local community housing and regeneration objectives rather than for exclusive purposes of generating profits. Are we bulletproof when it comes to the food hall and the complex around there, or is that straying into commercial? Thank you.
That was my question, one of my questions, actually. We're gone there, it's fine.
Yeah, I do believe we are. And if you go back to the decision to acquire Lock Meadow, and it's been, the statement has been repeated with further investment at Lock Meadow, and it's always been made clear to members that the investment there, yes, it generates a financial return, but also it's about achieving the council's strategic objective of making Maidstone a thriving place, which is the kind of thing that a council should be doing. So that's the justification. We're certainly not doing what some councils were doing a few years ago, buying retail parks up in Scotland and investing purely for financial return. It's all investment in the borough, and it's intended to boost the borough's economy.
So you're not purchasing a golf course, that's good.
We have a golf course, but it's slightly indirect. Okay. Look, just forgive me, I just got a few questions and observations myself. And it's back actually to page 115, and it's again this issue of the financing costs. It's just a question, because when you talk about, although capital expenditure is not charged directly to the revenue budget, interest payable on loans, etc., it obviously is charged. What about depreciation and amortization? When you're looking at the cost of financing in the accounts, you would be charging something for that, wouldn't you?
Yes, the way that it works with local authority accounts is that we charge MRP, which is, if you like, a proxy for depreciation. And in the accounts, the accounts for statutory purposes, the accounts that are prepared under generally accepted accounting principles, reverse out MRP and put back in depreciation. So we're doing it, but in an indirect way.
Thanks, Mark. That actually was my next question, actually, because this minimum revenue provision that you've got, I just wanted to ask you to explain what that really is, but I think you've done it now. It's just effectively a depreciation, is what you're saying. Yeah, into the accounts. Okay, No, I understand it in that sort of language. Okay, thank you. Just coming back to the SIPFA, you know, these changes, the revised codes on SIPFA. You're saying these don't come in until 23, 24, that's right? But some of the items are quite, I mean, I would assume we're doing it already, are we? I mean, some of them look as if we should be actually doing them. I mean, about the long term, some of the bullets, you know, like I've got one, there's one, it's on page 46, is the whole list on the report. And I was just sort of a bit curious, really, about it. To effectively manage liquidity and longer term cash flow requirements, we should be doing that anyway, shouldn't we?
I think that's absolutely right. And what this is doing is compelling us to put down in writing some of what we're doing already. I think things like addressing ESG issues within the capital strategy, we probably need to do more on that. But a lot of the things, I think we'll be ticking the boxes already.
Yeah, that's always good to know. Thanks, Mark. Right. Let me just say, I'll make sure I can actually read my own writing here. Yes, if it's para 3.1, I just wanted to check this in the, there's something that I wasn't quite sure about. Just bear with me a minute, I can find it. Outside of the page. Yes, it was, it's on the table on page 54 at the bottom where you've analysed the external debt. And you've got, it's at take 2021-22, you've got actual gross debt at 31st of March of 28,075, and then the debt on the 1st of April 22-23 it seems to is 26,602, and I'm just trying to get my head around what the difference was between the figures. Shouldn't they be some? There must be something adjustment within there, but I just wasn't sure how the table was put together. I know it's a point of detail, but
Hello, Chairman.
I'm trying to understand it really.
Yeah, it's to do the MRP that goes in there, so there's a slight,
It's the MRP.
Probably to make it clearer, I'll probably need an extra.
It needs an extra line, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yes, you're correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's hidden. Yeah. So it hasn't been done.
As long as I know, because I just couldn't figure out where that come from. But it's the MRP again. Okay, that's that one. Okay. Let me just see. Oh yeah, this is interesting. Page 85. Yeah, I got a bit confused when I saw the table on page 85, and you've got the these colour coding differences. So it's yellow, these are all yellow. So you've got UK government gilts, you've got the limit 8 million, then you've got maximum maturity period 5 years. And I thought the yellows were, when it was classified as yellow, that it was a 1 year max. And have I misunderstood that? It was just the table again. I may have got it wrong, but it's just kind of, because it is a very detailed thing, and reading it is.
Who sets those limits? Sorry to butt in, Chairman.
No, go on, Peter. Yeah, because it's
pound limit per institution.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a view of what they call it, link, or is it an internal view? Because some of I personally wouldn't put any limit on either timing or amount on anything to do with the UK government. If the UK government nosedives, we may as well all go the other way across the channel.
Yes, they're from Link. The durations are from Link. And what we do, we work accordingly with the durations. So if it's for 100 days, we give it a 3 million limit. If it's up to a year, it'd be 5 million limit, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we do the amounts for each one, but the durations actually come from Link. Just checking the yellow. I thought yellow was 5 years, but I try to find it in the document.
Just while John's looking that up, in the end, it's up to the council to set the limits it wants, but we are relying on Link's advice here. So, their advice is sound, we believe, so we're following their guidance.
If I may interject, not disparaging Link at all, but certainly when it comes to inflation projections, capital economics, I think it was called, seem to be rather different. So are you too beholding, too believing, too whatever in your consultants? Should you, I mean, certainly, why would they justify any limit on UK government? Please, I'm being a bit facetious, but why any limit on UK government?
It's all down to credit rating, really. I think a lot of it. UK sovereignty is rated as AA minus, which is probably not, well, is a good credit rating, but it's not the best in the world. So, sorry, go on.
AA minus, I suspect, is a credit rating for the UK government that a foreign investor looks at. We are in the UK. We're in the same boat as the UK government. So again, I will shut up. But don't we need to challenge consultants? And I was one for ages. One needs to challenge consultants. Why?
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, Councillor Cooling, and I don't think we accept everything they say without question. But in the end, it is useful to be able to hang your hat on something like a credit rating. I mean, people do it throughout the financial industry, and I think you would look askance at us if we started taking a different view to that that's defined by the credit ratings. I'm not saying that we blindly follow them, and I know that that led a lot of authorities into trouble back in 2008 when they were investing with Icelandic Bank. So that's always at the back of my mind, but equally it gives a good starting point for an assessment of financial risk.
I am only being cynical that one tends to get consultants in when you want to blame somebody else if something goes wrong. I am being facetious. But it strikes me that the blind faith in Link, and if they're still listening in, it's not meant to be adversarial. But I would rather you took capital economics view of inflation, for instance, rather than, blindly following Link. Time so he can get his questions together.
I've actually found it now. Thank you, Councillor Cooley. Yes, on Appendix E, page 123. That's the appendix with all the counterparty limits and who we can invest with. The key on page 123 has got yellow 60 months. Yeah, with normal institutions it's 8 million, but yeah, money market funds we've got 10 million with them. Yes, the orange colouring is for 12 months. Orange and blue colouring ones are for 12 months. Yeah. Yeah, it's the higher rated one. Yep.
God, sorry, I'm sorry. I'll start again. It's page 96, table. It's a minor point, but 22, 23, you've got loans for service purposes in millions. And you've got local businesses. There's been a switch from local businesses to local charities in 22, 23. And I was just curious to know what was behind that, or was it just how it turned out? I mean, there was a particular reason for doing that.
No, Chairman, there's no switch involved. I think that's a typo for local charities. I can remember that balance being there for last year, so I don't think it's been updated. So I could. Yeah, that was the initial Cobtree amount. Yeah, so that was from like the previous year. So yes, it needs updated. So I'll make sure that's updated for council. Yeah.
No, that's fine. I mean, I'm not here to point fingers at it. I just wanted to check because it did seem a bit curious when I looked at it. Yeah, no, that's fine. As long as it gets corrected, that's the main thing. Okay. Just a point on 103. Again, this I think it's okay, but it just make the point. Page 103. The 30 million that you got down for the leisure centre, that hasn't been approved yet, has it? That's something that's being still under discussion, isn't it? That's the penultimate paragraph on 103. You've got a provision saying for 30 million investment in leisure, but I didn't know any decision had been made on that.
It hasn't, Councillor Perry. And when we're drawing up the capital programme, we look at likely future spending, but the decision about individual schemes obviously has to go to members, this is due to be considered further at Policy and Resources Committee this Wednesday when it looks at the capital programme.
Okay.
But it is made clear there that the investment in the leisure facility clearly depends on what members decide to do about future leisure provision in the borough.
Okay. Right, okay, that's fine. Just got a couple more points and I'm finished. 12, yes. What was it here? Yeah, I was. It's more an observation more than anything else, I think. So it's page 113. Actually, it's the table 5. That's quite interesting, isn't it? Because you've got the capital financing requirement, and you've got the debt, and ideally, I think the strategy is always to keep the debt below the capital financing requirement, isn't it? But I do notice it's creeping closer and closer, isn't it? So you get in 26-27, it's still a bit of a gap. Don't get me wrong, but it is coming up, isn't it? So we've got to watch that a little bit, haven't we? I think it's my observation on that one. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Right. Oh yeah. That's one of the final. Yeah. Can you explain this one to me? It's table 6, actually. It's where you've got the outstanding borrowing and you've got the liability benchmark. And that again, whereas in 21-22, you've got quite a big difference. But then it seems to get closer and closer and closer, doesn't it? Until there's virtually no difference at all, it seems to me. That was because that's quite an important control factor, isn't it? It's on page 113, yeah.
Yes, so I think the paragraph above explains what the liability benchmark is, and what it's saying is that if we were to borrow the absolute minimum that we could, we would have the liability benchmark figure. We're actually borrowing a bit more than we need to. I mean, the reason we're borrowing a bit more than we need to is because it's important to keep a cash float for liquidity purposes and so on. But just for comparison, but you can see the same feature here that you identified in the previous table, which as we borrow more, we are getting more highly geared. And I think it's, I mean, it's absolutely the right point. The question is whether we're too highly geared. And what I would say to members, if you're kind of worried about that, then look at the table on page 115, where it says proportion of net revenue stream. If we were a PLC and our interest as a percentage of net revenue was 18%, which is where we're going to end up in 26, 27, I think you'd say we were still quite safe. I think if we were a PLC and we had a interest as 100% of net revenue, that's when we would be starting. Well, we would have started getting worried a long time before that. But I think 20% is probably as high as we'd want to go in terms of gearing.
Yeah, absolutely. I take your point. But it's an important issue, isn't it? No, that's just saying, it's the whole gearing issue is very, very important, but we're okay. Yeah.
In fact, Mark, on that one, 18.5%, this is where your extra line or two saying, but by the way, of that, this is going to be self-financed by the project itself, comes into play. It comes into play, I would have thought.
I've done my question. Does anybody else want to mention it? Councillor Zielinski, please.
Sorry, just a very quick question, Mark. I noticed on the counterparty list there's a rating of WD for Fitch. Is that withdrawn or what is it? The WD. So we got it on OP Corporate Bank in Finland and Commerzbank AG.
Yes, it does mean withdrawn. I was asked earlier by Councillor Cummings.
Okay.
Yes, it does mean withdrawn. Yeah, I was asked by Councillor Cummings earlier.
Okay. It's still got a Moody's and S&P rating.
So do I need to say that again?
Sorry, can you repeat what you said, Councillor? Because the acoustics here are not very good, and sometimes we just miss things.
In the previous agenda item, some people weren't speaking close to or into the microphone, and it was a bit difficult to hear some of the verbal exchanges. But, one point briefly, on page 37, the very first word, I believe, should be develop, not development.
Yeah, well, that'll be corrected as well. That's a good spot, very good spot. Thank you. Right, if there are no more questions, look, we, as you'll see on page 34, we have to make agree and recommend to the council the adoption of the 3 points: the treasury management strategy, the investment strategy, and the capital strategy, all for 2022-23. I know this is complex, but I think that they are subject to the minor changes that we've talked about. I'm happy to move from the chair that we agree these 3 strategies to go to council. Councillor, oh, that's fine. Good. So I've got a seconder. So are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you, everybody. Right. And thank you for the discussion, because it's always good to have a good exchange of views on these. Hopefully the next 2 items can be fairly quickly. So agenda item 14, external audit procurement. Mark, do you want to quickly go through this one?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The committee's being asked to decide about external arrangements for 23-24 onwards, and the choices are set out in paragraph 2.2, and also some of you may have attended the briefing that Rich Clark and I did before the meeting back in November. And essentially the choice is between doing the procurement ourselves or in conjunction with another authority, or using the PSAA and outsourcing the procurement. Now, the report talks about the experience with PSAA, and for various reasons, there are problems with the current arrangements, and you've heard earlier about the delays in completing our audit, and that's obviously a problem common across many local authorities. But the recommendation here is that we do go with the PSAA approach for the next 5 years, in the belief that there have been lessons learned from the first go at procurement during this route. Amongst other things, I've mentioned the fact that that PSAA are now going to give a much higher weighting to quality in their selection of auditors, and PSAA, given their buying power, ought to be able to get a better deal, ought to be able to have more influence on the market than we ever could by ourselves. So the recommendation in the report is that that we go with option 2, which is to opt into the PSAA arrangements. And if members agree, this will go to council that needs to make the final decision at its meeting on the 23rd of February. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for that. I think the paper is very, very clear, very self-explanatory, and I'm happy to move from the chair that we accept the recommendation to go with the PSAA as proposed. Can second it? Councillor Brindle. Councillor Cumming, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Does this mean that we might still end up with Grant Thornton as the auditors? Because obviously they do have sort of historical relationship with us. So is that a possibility?
It would be entirely out of our hands. I mean, there are a number of questions. First of all, Grant Thornton has to decide to bid for the work. I don't know if Trevor can give us any idea about their thinking about that. If they bid, if they're successful, it's then up to PSAA actually to allocate auditors to individual authorities.
Yeah, would that influence the award of the contract?
I would add, I mean, if you work in the commercial sector, then big PLCs, they don't stay with the same firm of auditors necessarily for 20 odd years. They may turn over and change. And it seems the same for government agencies as well. The one agency I'm very familiar with is the Civil Aviation Authority, which I chaired the Finance Committee for a number of years, and they've changed their auditors. They've had PwC, they've had Deloitte, they've had many different auditors over the period. So it's not uncommon to do that. It's quite useful sometimes to have you know, someone not too locked into a particular organisation. So I think some of us in the accounting world will remember Arthur Anderson, a name from the past that I wanted to run into them in my time. So I know exactly, you know. So I think we should leave it with the PSSAA. They'll assess it. They'll do very well, much for us, and I think that is probably the best approach. Councillor, come in.
Yeah, thanks again, Chairman. On page 137, item 32, it says, managing auditor independence issues where an audit supplier has a pre-existing relationship with an opted-in body which prevents it from accepting an audit appointment. Now, we've had dealings with PricewaterhouseCoopers actuary department in relation to our pension fund. Does this mean that they would automatically be excluded from working for us?
I think the kind of thing that might be envisaged is where there's perhaps consultancy work that has been being done for an authority, but something like the pension fund audit, which is a separate entity, I don't think that would be an example of something that would rule the auditor out.
Yeah, one other point, page 142, item 78, it says the appointing an auditor to audit its accounts for a financial year by no later than 31st of December in the preceding financial year. Does that refer to the beginning of the financial year or the end of the financial year?
I think that the best way of thinking about it is if we're currently in 21-22, so what this is saying is that for the auditor for the current year, we would have had to have appointed them by 31st of December 2020 to comply with the legislation. So you get your auditor in place 3 months before the start of the year to give them a good run at the accounts.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we have, so it's been proposed and seconded. Are we all in agreement to go with the recommendation on the working paper? Okay, lovely. Thanks very much, everybody. We got the final item then is agenda item 15, which is the risk assessment update. We are required to note this, just to note it, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't discuss it. But does anybody wish to comment on this? It's the standard thing with the matrix and everything. Yes, please, Councillor Titchener.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Yes, I appreciate it's just a comment really, but on page 156, and they're talking of, as I said before, 6% inflation, and if there's a risk that higher levels of inflation may become embedded, and at the bottom of the page it says capital programme cannot be funded. That's the risk. Now, just my comment really is that if the capital programme can't be funded, then if this was my company, and I was looking at page 110, 111, I would like to know which of these capital programmes might be at risk if it's 5%, 6% or 7%. That's all I would say, because my view is that inflation could become embedded, and we will have a problem with the capital programme unless we borrow lots of money. Anyway, that's all I want to say on that one.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was just looking at the matrix, which is always very useful, I think. Yes, it's a fairly high level risk, isn't it, even on the matrix, though you could argue, sorry, these are quite subjective, and I suppose you could argue could be a higher level risk than it's actually put on the matrix, but that's just only a comment from me. I think it's something we need to keep watch on, that's all I would say. Thank you.
If I may, one more comment, Chairman. In the risk, in the matrix at the back here, is there a reason why we don't have long-term liabilities in this risk factor, or is that out of the picture? The long-term liabilities are about £96 million, I think.
Should comment long-term liabilities.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Titchener. I think it's a good point, and I assume that what you're alluding to is the pension fund liability, and I think it's definitely something to consider putting in here, because if, you gave the example previously, if the number of staff was reduced drastically, it would mean pension contributions for the remaining staff would go up. If the stock market crashed, then that would affect the value of the investment. So it's certainly something worth considering. So I'm happy to take that on board.
Yes, Councillor Cooley.
Okay, thank you. Mark, it's a bit of an old chestnut, but in the top right-hand corner of the matrix P, that's financial impact from resurgence of COVID-19. Again, slightly facetious comment. I believe the council did financially relatively well out of COVID because of the government grants. So I really think that P ought to be qualified on the assumption the government does not fully support, or whatever words. I don't think it's fair to have P up there, because that wasn't reflected over the past 18 months. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Are there any more comments at all? Then we only have to, we have to note this. So are we happy to note this at this stage? Good, noted? Okay, fine. Right, that closes the meeting, but just one more thing to say. I don't know if you are aware, but this is Ellie Dunnett's last meeting with us, and she's leaving this Friday, I think, to go to Pastures New. And Ellie, I'd just like to wish you all the very best in your new position, and thank you for all the work you've done for us. You've been a very valuable member, I know, of Mark's team, and you've supported us over a number of years. So I'd like to wish you, and I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of everyone in this room, to wish you all the very best for the future.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and all the best to you all.
Good, okay. Okay, I think the meeting is closed, so well done everybody, and thank you very much for your contributions.